So a little different video than normal in this tutorial since I have my youngest hanging out at the shop. We have a special project and I'll let her explain.
I want to make some ears for my Barbie.
Yes, you heard that right. We're about to make some little ears, more specifically some little piglet ears, or as Rourke pointed out, these could also be Cheshire cat ears for her Barbie doll. Now, to start with, she'll need to make a pattern.
Mold these little piggy ears.
Now, once our pattern is ready, in this case, Rourke was able to sculpt some little ears out of some Protolina gray-green, and she actually used a little ring from her orange juice top.
Clay and something from my orange juice.
Now, she did this on her own coming into the shop one day, and I thought this warranted a video showing her a little bit of the ins and outs of the family business. And also, I thought there were some chances to cover some basic resin casting and mold making questions that some of you might have that we'll be addressing in this video. So follow along as we create some little custom aftermarket parts for Barbie dolls. Okay, so for Rourke's Piggy Ears, we have to make a mold box first. Now we're just going to make a very shallow mold box, and because the detail is on the front side, the little piggy ears are facing this way, the back side is going to be flat, so the logical easiest way to approach this would be to put those with a flat side down, and then we'll actually pour through that side. So to do that, we'll just cap it off this way, and we're just going to need to cut out the bottom of this wax paper cup with a handy scalpel. Now it's important to note that the plastic little ring from the orange juice is sulfur free, and the Protolina gray-green is sulfur-free. So we're going to be making this mold with platinum silicone, so we don't have anything that could contaminate that or inhibit it. But when in doubt, always test, because if you don't know the materials you're working with, always a good idea to run a test. So we're just going to secure this cup over the top here with some hot glue, and then we'll be ready to release it and pour our mold. But we just need to make sure we have plenty of clearance. I've got about a ½ inch all the way around. So now we're ready to secure that, and of course, being that I am the adult, I'm wielding the scalpel, which I put back into its little safety silicone chunk. Okay, now we're ready to secure this over our part with some hot glue.
Ooh, I see the steam.
We want to make sure we secure that really good so we don't get any leaks of silicone out the bottom. And we just need to pour, this is going to be a fairly shallow mold. This only needs to be poured to maybe about ½ inch to 3/4 inch. Okay, we're ready to release our pattern, and to do that we're going to use some of the Super Release PTR, and as I mentioned in our previous video, this used to be Ejected 33. Same exact release, just new name and new clever packaging, so just be aware of that. If you see us in older videos using Ejected 33 in that old plain looking can, just know it is now Super Release PTR, just a little public service announcement. So again, we're just going to give a spray of release in there, and we are now good to go. And even though the silicone doesn't really want to stick to our pattern or our clay, this does make cleanup a lot easier. When we release a pattern and release all the mold surfaces, it's going to make that silicone peel out of there a lot easier. So we mainly do that as more a precautionary measure than a real concern of it bonding. But you'll find when you use a light spray of mold release like this, it does make a big difference in overall cleanup and ease of demolding. Okay, we're ready to mix our silicone. Now for this particular piece, I wanted this to be fairly soft silicone to allow the silicone to pull around those little ears. And so I'm using a fairly soft silicone formula. This is BJB's TC5110. This cures to a short A10. And again, one of the reasons, in addition to the undercuts, is a small mold like this with really thin areas. I didn't want to build a complicated vent system or anything on this, so I just want to be able to pour the resin in and squeeze the mold a little bit to evacuate the air bubbles. So you'll see that when it's all done, but having a softer mold really lends itself well to that. Now 5110 is mixed 1-to-1 by weight. Haven't tried this formula by volume, but I typically, weight is always going to be a more precise way to measure. So we're just going to do 20 grams of part A and 20 grams of part B. And just remember, the smaller the batch size you work in, the more careful you have to be to make sure you're accurate, because that margin of error goes way down when you're working in small batches. So take care to make sure you're mixing as accurately as possible. Now 5110 is a fairly low viscosity silicone formula. For this simple mold, we're not going to vacuum degas, but just to give you an idea, this is pretty low viscosity silicone and almost clear, so fairly easy to see into to see if we've got any bubble entrapment. So this is going to give us about a 30 to 40 minute working time and a 2 to 3 hour demold, according to the label here. So, relatively fast cure. And that long open time, that long working time or pot life, will allow those bubbles to come to the surface and pop. So we're just going to pour. This is the nice thing too about doing these small batches in these little cups, is we can just pinch that cup and pour that in a thin stream. And there we go. Now again, as I point out in other videos, always a good idea to keep your batch, your leftover silicone to the side, because that allows you to grade your work later on. If there's any problem with this mold, we can always gauge it against this control right here, because we know this doesn't have any contaminants, any sulfur clay or anything like that. So if we ever have cure inhibition, we can always go back to our mixing cup and use that to grade our work and see if there was anything going on here. Because if this cured fine, but this did not, that's a good indicator that you have some kind of contaminant on your pattern. So now we're ready to wait the requisite 2 to 3 hour time to demold, and we'll see how our part comes out. Okay, we're now ready to open up our mold. Our silicone has cured. And now ready to cut open our mold box. This knife, which was generously sealed into a pallet sent to us by BJB. So I don't know who BZ is, but I bet he's looking for his knife, and we got it. So BZ, just let us know. We'll send it right back to you if you watch this video. Okay, so there is our finished mold. And ready to peel this carefully off. And you can see it has some little micro bubbles in it, but nothing that will affect the quality of our cast. We're now going to just carefully remove the clay and that plastic piece. And we'll be ready to do our first casting. Now, this is a little bit of a funky mold just because we have that little headband that work from the orange juice container that is such a thin area. We're going to have to go in and do some surgery to properly open that up. We're going to use an X-Acto knife and just very carefully go in here and open that up. Really, it didn't need much help at all. So there we go. There is our finished mold, ready for casting. And usually your first pull on a mold like this will pull out some of the little debris, some of the little clay chunks. So we're going to do one cast to clean out the mold and one nicer cast for Rourke's doll. Okay, we're ready to mix up our resin and pour it into our mold. And I'm going to pigment it so we get a pink piglet color using some red polycolor, because our TC800 will cure bright white. So adding a little bit of red polycolor is going to push it over into more a pastel red or a pink. So this is measured, TC800 is measured 1-to-1 by volume. So we're going to measure out our part B up to the 2 ounce mark, and then our part A up to the 4 ounce mark. Just remember, when you're working in small quantities, especially with fast setting materials, make sure you still take time to properly mix the material, scraping the sides and the bottom of the mixing container. And with these fast setting systems that are low viscosity, they mix very easily, so you don't have to spend a long time mixing. And real important, I've had some customers tell me they were waiting for it to get warm before they poured. You do not want to do that. If it's starting to get warm, that means it's already starting to move into its curing stage, and it's going to get very thick and difficult to pour, and you're going to trap a lot of air bubbles. So one of the things that you'll notice, especially when I'm working in really small batches, is I like to keep a larger mold handy to use some of the extra resin, because there's no way we're going to accurately measure a batch this small for these little ears. So I'm going to pour it in here first, so I take advantage of that nice low viscosity when it's new. And you'll see it kind of seeping in there, and we're going to help it along there by squeezing that mold. Now that gets us a nice full mold. And then we're going to take any excess and scrape that off. So there's our little happy little ears for Rourke. And then we'll use the rest of that resin to fill up that ear. These are just little ear samples that I pour up for our customers that need cured samples. So I'm just going to add a little bit more to that. And then again, just scrape that off. And that's why I chose this configuration, so we'd have access to all of that and be able to easily scrape away and sand any extra material. And now our leftover resin has begun to gel, and it's going to start to undergo that color change. And real important on this, if you're new to working with these types of resins, remember that they cure from the thickest mass and radiate out. So you'll notice that the thickest part of the ear is going to start to turn opaque and then radiate out from that point. This one is going to take a lot longer, and when that thinnest area has cured and turned solid, and you'll know that by that color change, that's when you're ready to demold your part. So keep an eye on that thin area. That's going to take the longest to set, and that's when we'll know that little piece is ready to demold. But it's the complete opposite of an air drying material. So the thinnest areas will take the longest to cure, the thickest areas will be the fastest. Okay, now this is about 30 minutes later, and I'm going to go ahead and demold the ear first. Now, see how this has these little striations here? This is a great indication of what we've covered in previous videos about mixing off ratio. This is one of the dangers of working in very small batches. This is a sign that we had too much part A. Now ultimately that doesn't really affect the integrity of the part. That's still going to give us a good tough part, but see how we have that kind of two-tone look? That is that extra part A. So be aware of that. I'm going to go ahead and pour one more set of these, but that's typically when you see that side effect of those little striations and you have a mostly translucent part, that is usually a side effect of being off ratio in favor of more part A. Now, more part B, with most of the formulas that we deal in, more part B will result in a part that's a little bit more bendy, has a little bit more give to it, and then it will also be exuding oil. If you put a lot of B in there, you're going to wind up with a part that exudes oil and will be impossible to paint. Now ready to demold our little ears, and I'm going to put this down on this flat surface to demold these. And there we have our part. Doesn't look like much. We're going to have to clean off the excess resin here, but there we go. And that TC800 gives us a little nice kind of snappy headband there that'll have just enough give to it that'll fit on one of Rourke's little doll's heads. So there you have our part. I'm going to pour one more with a little less polycolor in it too, so we get more of a pink, because we got a nice red, but we're really shooting for more for pink. So again, real important to remember that TC800 is a fairly fast setting resin. So this time I'm just going to put one drop in. This gives us about a 2-minute working time and about a 30-minute demold on really thin parts like this. Normally bigger, chunkier parts are going to maybe have a 10 to 15-minute demold. But these little bitty ears with this little bitty headband are going to take a little bit longer. So again, you can see that resin seeping in there, and we got it. This one I'm going to try to be a little bit more particular on and see if I can have a little less flashing. And then again, we're going to take that extra resin. And again, that's the nice thing about these soft molds. These are both 5110 silicone, and they're soft enough we can squish that a little bit to help evacuate any little air bubbles. Here we have two nice bubble-free parts. And even with a fast setting resin, we have plenty of time to pour those, even in a warm work environment. Today, my shop is probably about 83 degrees, and we still have time to do that. So be aware you can do that. You just have to move very fast, be very deliberate and careful about your work, and don't linger too long mixing, or you waste some of that critical working time. Okay, it's warm enough in the shop that it sped this right along. This is only about maybe 20 minutes later, and these are still a little bit green, but I'm going to go ahead and demold it. And one of the reasons I want to go ahead and demold this while it's still got a little bit more give to it is that will prevent us having any issue with those little hair clippy thing breaking off. So I'm sure there's a more technical term for that, but I have not ever used something like that for my hair, so I am unfamiliar with the terminology. So there we go. We'll open that up. You see we got a much nicer pink color this time. And there we go. We actually got a bubble-free part, which I'm actually really surprised about, those little parts being so small. I thought for sure we'd trap a little bit of air. Maybe we did get a little bit of, no, I think that's just where the edge of the little orange juice ring broke. So there you go. There's a nice little headband. So Rourke's doll gets a new accessory. And we have, for the shop, we have another sample of TC800 cured. So there you have, making little costume accessories and little resin parts for your children who want desperately to build custom things for their dolls. And there we have Rourke and her aftermarket parts for her Barbie, her happy little piggy ears.
Or Cheshire cat ears.
Or Cheshire cat ears, whatever approach is.
She's happy.
Good. Now, quick word of safety about all the products we use. Platinum silicone is incredibly safe to work with, so we don't really have any kind of issue there. But I would never leave my children alone to mix resins that turn solid for multiple reasons. Mainly because if they were to spill that, it would destroy whatever is around them. But then also the safety issues of I would want them to be mixing that in a well-ventilated area and all of that, and wear gloves. So good idea if you're doing a project like this. It's best for you to do the mixing and measuring and pouring and not involve your children in the resin aspect of the process. Just a good idea, just like you wouldn't let your child change the oil on your motor car. So there you have the basic process of making a mold and a cast of a little resin costume accessory for a doll. Well, thanks for watching this video that was a slightly different format than usual. But I hope if you made it this far into the video that you got something out of it, even for some of the seasoned pros. Maybe there's some new knowledge that you didn't have before. So thanks again, and be sure to check us out online. Remember, all of the products we use in our videos are available on our website at brickintheyard.com. And if you haven't already, be sure to like and subscribe, and be sure to click the little bell icon so you get notifications whenever we add new content to our channel.